Welcome to the Amplifying Leadership podcast. I am your host, Tara Lehman, a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is a division. This podcast is a place dedicated to amplifying your leadership through our great guest stories, tips, information, and more. To learn more about our leadership division, please visit us anytime at amplifyingleadership.ca. Today, I am welcoming Michael Kohan, an ICF certified coach and founder of the Elevate Life Project. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. And by the way, I love the name of your podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. I came up with it and a lot of people like it. And I just think it speaks to what I'm trying to accomplish. So thank you very much. So let's talk about you so our audience gets to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your story or your leadership story or how that comes into your.
So I'm originally went to Penn State for undergrad and Rutgers for graduate school. I was getting my master's degree at Rutgers. 9/11 happened. Sort of kind of didn't feel like continuing with my schoolwork. And I ended up getting a job in New York City. Fast forward, I'm 32 years old and I'm a director for a real estate investment trust. And I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I wasn't the most educated, even though I had a master's degree and a graduate degree. I just was the hardest worker in the room. If you worked 40 hours a week, I worked 50. 50 was this a slow week for me. I was averaging 80, 90 hours a week.
Wow.
And oh yeah. And I looked in the mirror and I didn't like the person looking back at me. I loved New York City, but New York City brings out your true nature. And there's both the shadow side of yourself and the light side of myself. And New York City brought out the shadow side of myself. So I was very aggressive at work. I was kind of toxic. And I was also on pharmaceuticals. I was taking 6 prescriptions a day from Adderall, Vicodin, Vyvanse, Xanax, and Percocets. And that's how you work 100 hours a week. So at 32 years old, I basically decided to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. I went on a vision quest. I left my corporate job where I was making, this was 2016. So I was making, 2013, excuse me. I was making about $500,000 a year, quit my job, and decided to go on this like a vision quest. I studied yoga, Buddhism, Hinduism, and I figured what I really was meant to do was to help people. So I decided to start being a life coach. And at first, it was sort of like hard to build. And I was trying to build an online coaching platform, and no one really understood what I was trying to do. And then COVID hit, and it took off. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I love it. It's perfect for me.
And let's be honest, 32, being a director is a lot of pressure on that young of age, really, to really truly understand leadership, right?
Well, I think I was a leader in the way that wasn't necessarily the most effective. I had great performance, but I had terrible job satisfaction. So I would, if you didn't perform well, this was like New York City downtown. So like there weren't a lot of protocols back in the mid 2000s. So like people were cursing, screaming, yelling. I mean, I remember my first job in New York City, my boss took my mouse away from me and took my chair away from me and said, you have to earn your seat and you have to earn your mouse. This was back in the day. Oh yeah. I didn't have a seat for the first month of work. I had to stand the whole time before standing desks were trendy. So like it was to like learn how to use all the macros back in the day, and was for efficiency why they took your mouse away from you. But they also took my desk away, and I had to stand for the most part working all day in the beginning.
Yeah,
different culture, different life.
For sure, for sure. Well, I want to talk about the 4 pillars of visionary management that you would like to share with us today. So why don't we start by you helping our audience understand what you mean by that?
So one of the things that I come across when I'm working with clients, so I'll get clients who either run their own business or they are director level or above, sometimes a manager, who are just struggling in their role, right? Usually have some sort of imposter syndrome that I have to work through that we can talk about, but they're also having trouble with their team because they think they're supposed to be a leader always. And then what happens is the people that work for them aren't performing. So I always have to start off with, when I say visionary manager, I always say, instead of being just a leader, you have to be both a leader and a supervisor. And a lot of people struggle with these two concepts. Everybody thinks they're just supposed to be a leader, and they forget that their job as a manager, their first priority, their first contract is to ensure the people that work for them are able to perform their jobs so that they have a paycheck, so that they
Mm-hmm.
can provide for themselves and their family. And when you just manage from a leadership standpoint, well, unless you have high performers that are go-getters that are going to do a great job and are self-sufficient, they're most likely going to fail. So I tell everybody, as a visionary manager, the first thing you have to understand is your job is to be friendly with the people that work for you, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not friends with them. There's a
Yes. Big
difference,
difference.
right?
Yes.
Huge difference, right? You can talk to the people that work for you about their personal life, right? Friend,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, marriage, kids,
Sports.
sports,
Yeah.
but you're not supposed to talk about like your problems,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're supposed to allow them to talk to you, and you're supposed to be friendly with them, but you're not supposed to be friends with them, right? And we do that by understanding empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first thing that people struggle with as supervisors or managers, the difference between compassion, empathy, sympathy, and resolve, right? So you break it down by first understanding compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion is understanding people's motivations, their struggles, and you're able to understand where they're coming from, right? So we have compassion for everybody in this world, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't always have to have empathy with everyone. Empathy is the next level. Empathy are the people you work with and work alongside. Empathy is to understand people's motivations, their struggles they're having, their motivations, and you can provide advice for them. You can give them direction. You can understand their struggles and give them the skills so they could succeed. And
Mm-hmm.
you can address underperformance. Sympathy is where most managers struggle because that's where they think they're supposed to be. And sympathy is where you get directly involved. And that's the difference between the friend and the friendly. When you have
Mm-hmm.
sympathy, you suffer alongside the person, right? It's a Greek word, it means to suffer. So you understand their motivations, their struggles, and the challenges that they're facing, and you can provide them with advice and comfort. But when you sympathize, you get involved. So now you're friends with
Mm-hmm.
them. Now you're in the ditches with them instead of sitting there trying to teach them the skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fourth component, to have resolve. And this is the other side that managers struggle with. They think that when someone isn't doing well, that they're not keep performing up to standards, they're not meeting deadlines, that somehow they're supposed to be their friend. And if they don't have good boundaries, then they don't have resolve. And resolve means you
Mm-hmm.
have a backbone, but you have it with an open heart, meaning you don't go in there and berate someone and belittle them, but you provide clear direction. And if
Mm-hmm.
they're not meeting up to those standards, you need to address them before you have to put them on a PIP. Because once they're on a PIP, it's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And that's the big struggle that most managers have. And that's the first step, right? You have to lead through that emotional intelligence, because then you go into understanding when you lead and then when you supervise. And that's the biggest struggle.
Yeah, and for our audience, a PIP is a performance improvement plan, just in case somebody out there doesn't know what that means. Um, I like how you explain the difference in the pillars because, when it comes to sympathy, that is where you're only almost taking ownership for someone else's emotions, which is not the purpose. That's where empathy can come in, where we can say, oh, I can appreciate that you're feeling that way. You know, maybe here's some resources if it's something that it requires, like an employee family assistance program or something. You can offer that. But sympathy is owning those emotions, and we don't want to be owning someone else's emotions because as a leader, that just stresses us out. It adds to our own stress. But I also want to talk about boundaries because you mentioned
Mhm.
boundaries, and I think it's super important to really understand boundaries because even if you get along well with your team, there are still boundaries that need to be set. What would you say some of those boundaries should be?
Well, think about this. Who are the best people you ever worked for?
Hmm.
Is it the person you work for that was your friend, or the person that you worked for that had high standards and was very demanding, but you knew exactly what they wanted and you were able to meet those expectations? I remember when I was 28 years old and I was probably making 150, 175 a year. And this was like before the 2008 crisis and
Hmm.
New York City was affordable, right? And I got an email from my boss, and it was like a Thursday night at 7:30, and she emailed me and she wanted a report for a presentation she had to do for the owners of a property the next day. And this is like a 40-story, $200 million rent roll
Hmm.
complex.
Wow.
And I had to do a performance analysis. And she's like, and I knew all the information and just had to push enter on an Excel spreadsheet. But I was out to dinner with friends and I had two drinks. And I didn't get back to her. Saw the email. I was like, meh, I'll deal with it in the morning. I stroll into the office at 8:30 in the morning. I sit down and I start doing my work. And I get an IM message from my boss. And she says, come into my office.
Hmm.
And I came into the office and she said, how come you didn't get to respond to my email the night before? And I explained to her I was out to dinner.
Hmm.
And she said, look, work is hard. That's why we give you a paycheck.
Wow.
And work leads you to growth. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a personal life. You're entitled to a personal life. But if I email you at 7:30 at night for something, all you had to do is say, I'm out to dinner with friends and I'll get that for you in the morning. And my response would have been, okay. But you didn't. And so I didn't know what was going on. So I ended up having to do the work instead of you. That's boundaries, right? Setting clear expectations of what she wanted from me. And she told me what she needed. She was a certain, like, it's the different forms of communication, right? We all
Hmm.
have four styles of communication: passive, passive aggressive, aggressive, and assertive. Assertive is the ideal form of communication when you're an effective leader, right? Firm but play with a clear message,
Hmm.
respectful of self and others, and actions and words fit with words spoken, right? Most managers, especially new ones, but
Hmm.
most managers vacillate between passive aggressive and aggressive, right?
Because they
They're
don't
either
know, right? They're
right, they're
struggling
either
with
screaming.
understanding. Yeah.
Right. They're screaming and yelling at you, or they're making snide comments, or they're making things like they're making jokes or innuendos without being direct. And that confuses people, right?
Hmm.
When you sit down and say, this is what I expect from you, the person either rises to the expectations or to find somebody new. Too many people worry about the individual and want to be friends with the person rather than giving them clear guidelines so that then they can do a good job. I had the best relationship with this boss because she told me what she wanted, when she wanted it, and I knew what to do. I was never friends with her. I never, but like I was friendly with her. I would get a drink with her occasionally after work, but it was never more than a work relationship. And she was my
Hmm.
best boss because she taught me how to work hard. She taught me how to perform. And that way I was able to rise through the ranks in the city. And too many times we think, oh, I have to guide the person, inspire the person, motivate the person. And that works for some people. I'm that person. I'm a type A individual. But if you're not a type A individual, you can't go that way. You have to give them those directions. You have to give them those guardrails and those boundaries and then hold them accountable. Because if you're not holding them accountable, that's being a supervisor, then you're failing them. And too many managers, too many leaders think that they have to be friendly instead of being a leader. And they base
Hmm.
this on like television and social media and all these toxic messagings that they get all the time, right? Be a leader, right? Or be this
Hmm.
aggressive, terrible person. Got to find the middle on both sides.
And what I like that you pointed out is that clear and concise expectations are really important. So I want to come back to that for a second, because so many times we're left with, I need you to run this report, and we don't actually know what they need. I mean, this happened to me, way back early in my career. Like, I need this Excel spreadsheet with this information. I did it all, send it back. That's not what I asked for.
Right.
And then I have to redo it because he wasn't being clear and concise in what the expectations were. Eventually, we talked to figure out what that communication looked like for the both of us to work well together. Great relationship after that. But before we had that, it was a little frustrating because I was new to be under him as, my boss, right? It was very frustrating until we figured out, what did that communication look like? What did I need? What did he need? And how does that work together? Because we're all different people too, right?
Nothing's worse than when you get the feedback, you need to take ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of it's on par with we need to talk when you get that
Mm-hmm.
message on like Friday afternoon and the meeting's set for Monday. Like those are
Yes.
the two worst things you can say to somebody is you need to take ownership and we need to talk. Because when you say to somebody you need to take ownership, they will literally sit there and say, well, what do you mean I need to take ownership? I have no idea what you mean by taking ownership. And what I try to teach clients when I'm working with them is I said, whenever you're working with somebody and you need to communicate with the people underneath you about what you want, never say we need to take ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to confuse them. You need to do like follow the military standard and do the bottom line up front. You need to take ownership of this project, and listed below are the bullet point salient details that I need you to do. If you're
Mm-hmm.
unsure of them, please schedule a meeting and you and I will go over them one by one. So in the future, you need to know what to do. And too many times people don't do that. And so whenever you're as a leader, as a manager, as a supervisor, communicating, always follow the bluff approach. Bottom line up front, and then salient bullet points underneath so the people working for you are clear and understand what you want. And if they don't understand, then you need to schedule a time to sit with them and you need
Mm-hmm.
to walk them through it. Because you can't just assume everyone's going to understand that.
Oh, yes,
That's the
exactly.
big challenge. And a lot of times what happens is because of all the different communication, we lack these different protocols and channels to communicate. So things get mistranslated in emails,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so you have to give them the permission to either call you or discuss those details so that they perform their job well.
Yeah. And that written communication piece that you mentioned, we could take so many things so many different ways, because there's no tone, there's no person, you can't see what they're doing, you can't see the hand movements, you can't, if you're not allowed to ask questions, then I could be doing it all wrong, because to me it wasn't what you thought you wrote. So written communication can be its own enemy, really, if we don't allow for that. Feel free to ask me questions, or feel free to summarize what I'm asking you with the written communication, right? So, I mean, I think that is a big thing that, listeners take that from here, is that written communication can be the worst if you don't allow for that feedback and that summarizing, right?
Whenever I'm working with a client who gets promoted or takes on a management job for the first time, what I will always say to them the first time is the first thing I will say to them is write a communication charter to your team, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
the first thing. Like sit down and have a communication charter. It used to be really hard. Now it's easy. You just run it through ChatGPT. You just take the different ways you have communication and you
Mm-hmm.
create a rules index for the people that work for you so that they're not always knocking on your door or calling you or text messaging. You say, and you break it down into different quadrants. You base it on like the Eisenhower principle. Is it if it's
Yes.
urgent, important, pick up the phone and call me, or walk by and knock on the door of my office, depending on if you're local or remote type setup.
Yeah.
If it's urgent, non-important, schedule an email meeting or send me an email. If it's project related, communicate through Slack, right? You have different
Hmm.
communication charters. And at the top of the communication charter, you always say, if you're not sure of anything that you need to do, always schedule conversation. If you don't
Hmm.
know what I mean or the direction to go, schedule a conversation. And that's the leadership side. The leadership side is open door policy, open
Hmm.
communication. That's what it means to be a leader. The supervisor side is the clear instructions on how to communicate, when to communicate, and the different methods to communicate. And too many times people have with groups is they're communicating in emails, text message,
Hmm.
Slack, instant messaging, knocking on the doors, and it overwhelms both the managers and the supervisors, and then it overwhelms the team. And so
Hmm.
that's the first thing. Step one is a communication start channel, right? Excuse me, charter.
Charter.
Step two is you set up clear guidelines of here's what it means to do your job well for me. If you're getting promoted into the role, or you're hiring somebody new, you want to give each person a clear understanding of their job and responsibility so that if they're not performing well, you can reference it well. The third
Hmm.
thing is to allow for the people working for you to be able to come to you and say, here's a good idea how this would do better. You want to offer up ways to collaborate and allow the people underneath you to work up
Hmm.
just like you work down. And that's the
Hmm.
leadership side, right? And then the supervisor side is you set clear expectations and guidelines
Yeah.
and deadlines. And that's what it means to be a visionary. And too many times when we go into these roles, then we're just like, all right, and we're off. And we don't sit down and
Hmm.
we don't create those foundations for people.
And it's interesting because I want to talk about those foundations and the charter for just a second.
Mhm.
Because when we don't create those things, and I'm sure you hear this from your clients as much as I do too, I don't have time to do that. I'm like, take the time because you're going to save yourself days and hours and weeks later on if you take the time to do it now, figure it out instead of having all the back and forth all the time, or people doing projects then come back to you and they're not correct because that none of that was stated clearly. And if there's a lack of trust, they may not ask you the question, is this what you mean? Things like that, right? So I think really creating those charters, those processes is really, really important.
It's the biggest challenge that people have. It's not the biggest challenge, but it's one of them. I get too many of my clients never ever allow people that work for them to solve the problem. And I
Hmm.
will be in a meeting with them and I will be interrupted four times as somebody is knocking on their door or calling them
Yes.
to ask a question. And every
Hmm.
time I go to the person, was that important? No. I'm like, then why'd they bother you? Was that
Yeah.
important? No. Well, why'd they bother you? And it's because they haven't ever set clear protocols or instructions for them. And
Hmm.
that's the hugest hurdle. So all they're doing is reacting. Emails, knocking on the door, emails. And then they go to me and say, all I do is work. Especially my entrepreneurs that have teams.
Yeah.
All they do is work. I'm like, well, do you schedule your email time? Do you schedule your meeting times? Do you have an agenda for meetings? Wait. And they
Bingo.
literally will
Hmm.
stare at me like, what?
Yeah.
And that is the first thing. And it's not hard to do, especially today with like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini. You can just word vomit your communication charter.
Hmm.
Here's the different channels I have. These are the people that work for me. This is what I want to address. And it will spit out a document and tell you that you can give to your team and says, in these situations, this is how you communicate. And these situations, and you can review it and you can tweak it, and then it's simply done. So that
Yeah.
any time that you feel that people are just knocking on the door and bothering you 24/7, you can reference back the communication charter and reference back to your team. See, this is the thing that people screw up, right? They have a person on their team. They go over like, when to bother me, when to not bother me. It's the classic example,
Hmm.
right? We'll do like, or like or like, communicating projects or work, and they think they have the conversation done once and it's going to be perfect, and they never
No.
address it again. And I said, and I'm like, this is where you're, once again, now you're their friend, right? Instead
Hmm.
of being friendly, right? Because now they're just knocking on the door and being like, hey, Mike, you got a minute? Hey, Mike, you got a minute? Or you go to a meeting and you're in a, director level or above meeting, and a person from a different department starts talking about the project you're working on, and you have no idea what they're talking about, because the person underneath you is collaborating with their
Yes.
department and they didn't tell you.
Hmm.
And I say those are the opportunities where you have to go back and address the corrections, right? That's being the supervisor once again, right? Being the leader is encouraging the people underneath you to work across departments so that they can get ahead and promoted. But being the supervisor is addressing those issues as they occur. Hey, every time you knock on the door to ask me a question, that's not, it's important to you, but it's not important to me. Distracts me from doing my work. Hey,
Hmm.
I went to this meeting and they asked questions about the project you were working on. And I asked you every week to give me salient details that I would need to know for a meeting. And here's the examples of the things I need. So in the future, you need to do better at doing these things for me. And a lot of times, a lot of managers forget to address the problem when they occur, and they just drive right past those opportunities to coach. And
Hmm.
then what happens, it's just like a marriage, right? It's just like a marriage, right? It's like, it starts with the little thing, like, toothpaste cap not being put
Right.
together in the shop bathroom, or leaving dishes in the sink. That festers and builds to the next thing, and then it builds to the next thing, and the next thing you know, you're yelling at your partner just like you're yelling at your employee, or you're micromanaging them. That's
Yeah.
the other side. That's the worst, because you've let these six other issues that you could have addressed build, and that creates more problems.
Yeah, it's all about developing our employees and helping them understand instead of dwelling on what just happened. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again as well. Why yell at people? That does nothing but just get the person that you're yelling at just fearful of ever saying anything to you again. Where if we have a more collaborative approach to it, let's tell them what went wrong, but let's figure out how we can fix it so they learn from this because it's all about the growth for employees. Absolutely. Yeah.
You're obsessed with being liked. It's
Yeah.
plain and simple. You think to be a good leader, good manager, you have to be liked. You don't.
No, you don't.
You don't.
Absolutely not. Respected,
You
sure, but you
just
don't have to be liked. Yeah,
right.
yeah, absolutely.
Nor is your goal to be liked. I mean, your goal isn't to be liked. It's to be respected. It's to admire. It's to enjoy working for. But you don't have to be
Hmm.
liked.
Yeah.
There are great CEOs, great managers, great directors that aren't liked,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah.
people do like working for them.
Hmm. Well,
Mm.
let's wrap up our conversation today. Do you have something that you want to leave our audience with today?
So when it comes to management and being a leader, right, if you want to be effective, and for those of you who are just starting out, or those of you who have gone from like the team lead to the manager, and now on a director level, or you're now a manager, usually it's like the director and the manager level. These are the two
Hmm.
people that really struggle. You want to be good at emotional intelligence, right? You either want to sign up for a course or read a book on understanding the five components of emotional intelligence. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're new to this game, tell every client, creates a great foundation, is learn the different personality types, type A, type B, type C, and type D, and then read the 1 Minute Manager. It's a great book. It gives you the
Hmm.
foundation, right? I always tell clients, I'm like, if you haven't read it, read it. And you'll be surprised. I mean, you'll be surprised. VPs, SVPs, they've never read it. And they'll be like, and then once they read it, it opens their minds and gives them a better understanding. I've had dentists who are struggling managing their office read the book and they're like, oh, now I know how to deal with the the technician and the office manager.
Mhm.
And so those are like the secrets. Emotional intelligence, understand personality types. I like the 1 minute manager for new managers.
Yes, and we are always learning, and we could have done really well, and then something changed. We changed organizations, and we fall into their habits. But reading even the basics, I always say, going back to the basics. I don't care if you're a CEO. Sometimes going back to the basics is what is needed. I yeah,
Yeah, a lot of people think CEOs lead through strength. CEOs lead through collaboration.
mhm,
That's something people don't realize. When you get to that level, when you get up to that board level, you don't realize that CEOs are not leading through like domination. They're
mhm,
collaborating with their board, the COO,
yeah,
the CIO, CTO, Chief Revenue Officer, because everybody underneath the CEO has their own sphere of influence, their own pillar, and you
mhm,
can't just fire these people. So you
yeah,
have to collaborate with them. And these people, if you're a publicly traded company, these C-suite executives have shareholders that are in partnership with them. And so what
mhm.
these large Fortune 500 companies, CEOs are great collaborators. So if you want to be a CEO, that's what you really have to learn to be.
Excellent. Thank you so much for a great conversation and all those tips as well as that information and advice. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
Of course, we thank you, our audience. We hope you gained some valuable insights or information from today's conversation with Michael. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a great rating. This helps us and our guests like Michael reach even more leaders with these helpful stories, tips, and advice. We do love helping other leaders grow and thrive. Leadership is better when we do it together, so we would love for you to consider our brand new Amplifying Leadership Circle community. More information on the community and all of our other services can be found at amplifyingleadership.ca. Until next time, remember, leadership matters.